I thought I was coming home to surprise my wife. Instead, I walked in on her with a man wearing a badge, and not much else. That moment didn't just end my marriage, it started the fight of my life. Even now, with everything I know, with all the love that still lingers in me somewhere, I can't bring myself to look at her the same. It's like something in me snapped, and now the very thought of her makes my stomach turn. As for the kids, that part's even harder. I can't explain it, just picturing their faces lately makes me feel sick. Literally. A few nights ago, I bolted to the bathroom and threw up every drop of Jack Daniels I'd drowned myself in. $30 worth of whiskey, gone like my peace of mind. But maybe I should back up. Let me start from the beginning. My name's Simon and I work maintenance in Missouri. For a long time I thought I had it all. I was married to Janice, this incredible woman, for 9 years. We had what I believed was a strong, honest marriage. At least that's what I told myself. Our story kicked off over a decade ago, and like most big stories, it started in a moment I never expected. I'd been in a workplace accident. Nothing life-threatening, but enough to land me in the ER with a nasty cut on my forearm that needed stitches. That's where I met her. Janice was the nurse on call that night. No nonsense, all focused, doing her job with this calm, cool confidence that just pulled me in. Even though I tried cracking a few jokes and flirting lightly to take my mind off the pain, she didn't play along. She was all business, professional and sharp. But she was stunning. She had this athletic build, long legs, a toned frame, and her dark hair was tied back in a no-fuss ponytail. What really stuck with me, though, were her eyes. Deep brown, clear and steady. As she numbed my arm with a shot of Novocaine and stitched me up, I found myself staring at her more than I probably should have. Funny how once you notice someone, they start showing up everywhere. It's like when you get a new truck and suddenly see the same model at every stoplight. That was Janice for me. I kept seeing her around town, at the grocery store, in traffic, walking her dog. More often than not, she was with a guy. Looked like her boyfriend. And honestly, he seemed to make her laugh. It stung a little, but I kept my distance. One night, though, I saw them at this local bar I go to sometimes. They were mid-argument. I didn't want to eavesdrop, but it was hard not to catch the tension. He stormed out and she was left sitting with her friends, visibly frustrated and buzzed from the drinks. I turned away quickly so I wouldn't draw attention to myself, but I couldn't help overhearing bits of her venting, something about him being controlling and jealous. She sounded fed up. I took the cue and headed out. 2 weeks later, I ran into her again at that same bar. This time she was alone, or at least not with him. A local band was playing and they launched into this old rock song I've always loved. That was my moment. I walked over, nerves bundled in my chest. "Hey," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Not sure if you remember me from the ER a few months back. I'm Simon. You, wanna dance?" She looked at me for a moment as if deciding whether she should. And then she smiled. "Yeah, sure." That night changed everything. We started dating, slowly at first. I didn't push anything. Janice wasn't one to rush into anything physical, and I respected that. After about a month, we took the next step. Our first real intimate moment was almost cinematic, like something out of one of those old romance flicks. We had dinner at this cozy Italian joint, pasta, a bottle of red wine, and some tiramisu for dessert. I wasn't trying to get her tipsy, just wanted her to feel at ease. And eventually we ended up at my place. Up until that point, I'd been with maybe 10 women before Janice, but nothing came close to that first night with her. It's burned into my memory. She had this incredible passion, like every part of her was alive in the moment, and honestly, I didn't care about her past. None of it mattered, not who she'd been with, not what came before. All I cared about was that she was mine now, and mine alone. For months after we first met, I decided to take her back to the very place where it all began. That little bar where I'd first asked her to dance. I waited for the right song to come on, took a deep breath, got down on one knee and asked her to marry me. Her eyes lit up and she said yes without hesitation. It was one of the happiest moments of my life. We set the date for the first Saturday in June. Everything felt like it was falling perfectly into place. Then, about 2 months after our engagement, something strange happened. I was out at the same bar one evening, just having a drink with an old friend. That's when this guy walked past our table. I didn't recognize him right away, but as he was heading out, he stopped and turned toward me. "You're Janice's fiancé, right?" he asked. I nodded. "Yeah, that's me." He smiled, but there was something tight about it, something just beneath the surface. "I just want you to know, we only started seeing each other after you two had broken up." That caught me off guard because as far as I knew, Janice and I had never broken up. I didn't say much, just something like, "All right, man." No problems here. He went on, said he had no hard feelings. Told me he had his own reasons for walking away and even wished us well. But before he left, he added something I'll never forget. Just make sure you're both on the same page when it comes to exclusivity. Janice has a complicated relationship with that word. Then he was gone. I sat there for a minute, trying to decide if he was just bitter or if there was something more behind those words. In the end, I decided not to let it get to me. People say all kinds of things when they've lost someone. Now, there are a few things about my own past I should probably explain too, just so you understand where I was coming from. Back in high school, I was a standout wrestler, good enough to land a scholarship at a state university. But everything changed during a match in junior year. I was up against a kid from a rival school and I'd beaten him before. This time though, he played dirty. Hit me low on purpose and left me on the mat in agony. I spent 2 days in the hospital. After that, I was benched for the season and truth be told, I never fully came back from it. That injury, it took something from me. Not just physically but mentally too. I lost the drive. I ended up dropping out of college, never finished my degree. Instead, I took a job with a local building company and started over. I could have pressed charges against that other wrestler. He got suspended and lost his own scholarship. But I didn't want revenge. I just wanted to move on. Life had already handed me more than my share of loss. My dad passed away when I was 12, and my mom followed 10 years later. No siblings, no extended family to lean on. I was on my own for a long time, just going through the motions, working and surviving. That all changed when I met Janice's mom, Penny. She became like a second mother to me. The kind of woman who made you feel like you mattered. Janice's father had walked out when she was a teenager. She used to reach out to him every year, even invited him to our wedding. He never answered. Never came. So Penny walked her down the aisle instead. It meant the world to both of us. As for me, I'd built a life with my own hands, literally. I became a Finnish carpenter, specializing in restoring old houses. Big, beautiful mansions on the coast. I've built a reputation over the years. People say I'm one of the best in the business. Wealthy clients from all over California call me when they want a piece of history brought back to life. I take pride in that. It's honest work and it gives me purpose. But none of that success, none of the admiration or praise, ever meant more than coming home to Janice. She was my world. At least that's what I believed. I make between $75 and $100 an hour, and on a good year, I bring in close to $150,000. Not too shabby for someone who never walked across a college graduation stage. But the trade-off is real. I spend 1 to 2 weeks each month on the road, hopping from city to city, taking on restoration projects for high-end clients. It's good money, sure, but it's not always glamorous. Working with wealthy folks has its ups and downs. Some of them treat you with respect and gratitude. Others, not so much. More than once, I felt like I was invisible in their world. Just the help, someone they didn't need to acknowledge beyond handing over a check. There was this one job I took in LA, working on a 10,000 square foot estate owned by a young actress. She dumped millions into remodeling the place. While I was inside tearing up flooring and sanding crown molding, she'd be out by the pool, stretched out naked under the sun like I didn't exist. It was surreal. I kept my head down and got the job done. Another time in Beverly Hills, I was restoring a historic property when I caught something I wish I hadn't. The lady of the house was fooling around, blatantly, with the pool boy. In broad daylight. Right there on the patio lounge. It wasn't some accidental glance either. They were fully into it, switching positions like it was part of some private performance. The worst part? Her husband was a good man. Kind. Treated my crew with respect. I couldn't just let it slide, but I didn't want to confront him face to face either. So when the job was done, I called his office anonymously and told him what I saw. A week later, I heard he'd filed for divorce. It shook me honestly. You think you're just there to fix the floors or bring a staircase back to life, but sometimes you end up witnessing the rot inside people's lives. And now here I am dealing with my own version of that rot. Janice and I have 2 kids. At least they've always been mine in my heart. That's where the shame really starts creeping in. But before anyone gets too quick to judge, let me say, I wasn't the only one keeping things hidden. There's something else I need to mention. Early in our relationship, Janice told me about her brother, Henry. He lives in Denver, a few years younger than her. She showed me a picture of him once, kept it tucked inside her wallet. When we'd go out as a family, sometimes people would stare. Some even asked inappropriate, borderline offensive questions. Eventually, Janice's parents packed up and moved to San Francisco, hoping the city's progressive nature would give them some breathing room. When Janice shared all that with me, I realized how much they'd all been through. I didn't want to be another person judging them for things that weren't anyone else's business. Later, when we started talking about growing our family, Janice brought up concerns about birth control. She'd been using an intrauterine device, but her friend Sharon, who's a nurse, warned her about the complications that can come from using it long-term. Sharon floated another option, one that turned the responsibility to me. She suggested I get a vasectomy. At first, I was hesitant. That's a big step for any guy. But the idea made sense, especially considering Janice's health. Just in case, Sharon recommended I freeze some of my material beforehand, said it was smart to have a backup. I followed her advice without thinking twice. Looking back, maybe I should have asked more questions. Maybe I should have paid closer attention to the things Janice wasn't saying. Because what I didn't know then was that the lies, hers and maybe even mine, were starting to pile up. And it wouldn't be long before they came crashing down. After a lot of thinking, I decided to give Janice the news about my vasectomy as a kind of Valentine's Day surprise. I know, not exactly the traditional romantic gesture, definitely not flowers or jewelry, but I figured it beat buying her another kitchen appliance. It was something real. Something that meant, in my own way, I was putting our future first. So I booked the appointment. The consultation with the doctor was short and direct. He asked all the usual questions, health history, family plans, and then hit me with one I didn't expect. Have you ever experienced any trauma to the scrotum? That brought me right back to high school. I told him about the time I got kicked during a wrestling match. It was brutal, left me swollen and in the hospital for 2 days. He nodded, then said something that stopped me cold. That kind of injury, it can have lasting effects. Based on your results, your sperm count is critically low. Natural conception would have been highly unlikely. It felt like the air got sucked out of the room. I just sat there, staring at the floor, replaying every moment of my marriage in my head. Every milestone. Every, I love you. Every night Janice laid next to me knowing something I didn't. That was the moment it all started to crumble. The love, the trust, the picture-perfect life I thought I had, it all started to rot from the inside out. I left the clinic in a fog, canceling a big restoration job I was supposed to start in Los Angeles. I told my crew I'd be out of town for a few days, but the truth was I wasn't going to work. I booked a last-minute flight to Florida. I was going to meet Janice's father for the first time. At the time, I felt like I was drowning in secrets. To protect myself, I started telling lies, more than I'm proud to admit. Lies to my team, lies to Janice, and maybe worst of all, lies to myself. That part didn't sit well. I've always prided myself on being the kind of man who speaks the truth, even when it's hard. But now, I wasn't sure who I even was anymore. At the airport, I called my buddy Fred. He's one of the few people I can really talk to. I told him everything, the doctor's news, the pit in my gut, the unraveling of the life I thought was rock solid. We agreed to talk more when I got back from Florida. When I landed, I reached out to Larry Adonis, an old acquaintance who ran a charter fishing boat out of Key Largo. Back in the day, things had been going well for him, but during our conversation he let me in on some unsettling truths. Apparently, during Janice's second year with an elite travel program, something she'd done in her youth, the group started making trips more frequently. That's when she started getting close to a boy named Henry Bishop Jr. His father, Henry Bishop Sr., also traveled with the team, supposedly as a chaperone. But Larry painted a darker picture. Both bishops, it turned out, had a reputation. They had a weakness for women and later, according to public record, an appetite for fast money and faster trouble. Henry Jr., a college sophomore on a basketball scholarship, was arrested for drug trafficking. Caught selling to an undercover officer, he ended up serving 7 years in prison for possession and refusing to cooperate with investigators. It didn't end there. Larry's sources told him that Henry was released about a year before Jacob, my son, was born. And if that wasn't enough, Henry got in trouble again shortly after being released. Nothing stuck long-term, but his record spoke volumes. And apparently, Janice and Henry had rekindled something months before Jacob came along. According to Larry, they were dating for 5 months. That was when my stomach turned. Larry could tell I was reeling. He offered to take me out for a drink, maybe buy me dinner just to take the edge off. I thanked him but declined. I needed to be alone. I needed to think. It was time to go home. To face everything. To start planning the next steps, whatever those would be. I caught the red-eye back to Portland that night and spent most of Wednesday going over my next steps. My thoughts were a storm of confusion and anger, but I knew I needed a plan. Not just rage and regret. A couple days before, I had updated my checklist. Top of the list now was hiring a lawyer. That night, I met up with Fred for dinner. He's been my rock through all of this. We talked for hours. He didn't sugarcoat anything, but his advice was grounded and clear. Protect yourself, protect what matters, and get everything in writing. And then, something unexpected happened. Amid all that sadness and disappointment, I found something I never planned to hear. A recorded conversation between Janice's lover, Henry Jr., and another man. It was captured accidentally by a recorder I'd left running. I wasn't even thinking about it when it happened. Janice had gone off to shower and the mic just picked up bits and pieces. But what it recorded chilled me to the bone. "Hey man, are you ready for this?" That's how it started. Then came the part that changed everything. Henry started talking about an opportunity he was planning to take advantage of. Apparently, Janice had overheard an elderly couple at her clinic talking about a trip they had planned to Israel. Somehow she pieced together enough details, travel dates, schedule, maybe even an address. Henry got the rest from a close friend. The man on the tape said, "I deleted the serial number so it couldn't be traced." That's when it hit me. This wasn't just betrayal. It was criminal. Henry, being a repeat offender, wasn't even allowed to possess tools like that, tools for breaking and entering. He was already walking a thin line, and under the state's three strikes law, just being caught with that instrument could mean a long stretch behind bars. He knew what he was doing. And I knew what I had to do. I had no doubt about what I heard. It was forgery, planned theft, maybe even worse. And I had the evidence. That night, I finalized the first phase of my plan. I came home the next day pretending like nothing had changed. But inside, I was already working through how to bring this all down, quietly and methodically. I made a decision. If Henry didn't back off, I would expose everything. I'd send the recording to the authorities, have them comb through the clinic's records, find out who leaked patient details, and let the law do its work. But I also made sure he understood the stakes. "If you fight me on the divorce," I wrote in the message I left, "just remember, you're risking not just your freedom but your kids' future. Think about them growing up without either parent, raised by your mother and your Uncle Henry. That's not a threat. It's a warning." I didn't stop there. I found out Penny had homeowner's insurance under my name and asked for it to be canceled that same month. No one would notice, until something happened. Until the aunts returned. And when they did, she'd have to file a claim. Only to find out she was no longer covered. As the Sicilians say, revenge is a dish best served cold. And in this case it was my turn to plate it. That afternoon I loaded up my truck with everything I needed to start over. Clothes, cash, my tools, and a few keepsakes. Larry helped me pack, didn't ask too many questions. He just nodded like he understood. I didn't look back. Not this time. Not long after, I sold my truck and set out for something I hadn't felt in a long time: freedom. A friend had invited me down to St. Bart's, and I was excited to catch up, maybe even clear my head by the ocean. But that excitement turned to disbelief when I pulled up to the pier and saw who was standing there with them. It was Janice. There she was, standing in the sun like a scene from another lifetime. Bikini top, Daisy Duke shorts, tan skin, and somehow still carrying the figure of a woman 10 years younger. She looked incredible. But all I felt was the weight of everything she had cost me. I didn't dock. I stopped the boat about 40 feet out, then backed up 100 more before shutting the engine down. Right on cue my phone started buzzing. It was Fred. "Fred," I said flatly, "what is this? Why is she here?" I didn't wait for an answer. I already knew I wouldn't get one that made any sense. That moment, seeing Janice like that, it shook me. Not in the way you might think. It wasn't desire. It wasn't longing. It was the clarity that comes when you see something that used to hold power over you, and feel absolutely nothing. I sat on the deck, stared out at the water and let it all go. But then something unexpected happened. During my time on the island I met someone. Her name was Simone. At first, it was just pleasant conversation, the kind of warmth you exchange with a stranger in a beautiful place. But soon, it became something deeper, something I hadn't felt since long before Janice. She was unlike anyone I'd ever known. She moved with the quiet grace of someone who wasn't trying to impress anyone, and yet, she did. She had short black hair that reminded me of Audrey Tautou in Amelie, and a laugh that felt like home. Simone was radiant but humble, elegant but real. Despite her well-off background, she was grounded. She cooked lunch for us most days and we'd sit out on the terrace together, sipping wine and talking about everything and nothing. We even laughed at how close our names were, Simon and Simone. By the time my stay in St. Bart's was winding down, I knew I couldn't leave without telling her how I felt. On my last night there, under the stars, I told her everything. I told her how broken I'd been, how guarded I felt. And I told her I wanted something real with her if she felt the same. To my surprise and quiet joy, she did. That night, we watched the waves roll in from our little spot by the water, arms wrapped around each other, and for the first time in years, I felt whole. Fast forward 5 years. Simone and I got married. We built a beautiful life together. We traveled, we dreamed, and we became a family. Joel and Juliet, her 2 children, became mine in every way that mattered. We weren't bound by blood, but by love, by trust, by the kind of loyalty I never knew could exist in a family. 10 years after my breakup with Janice, I finally knew peace. I finally felt ready to close the door on that chapter. So I did. From our home in Paris, I sent Janice a photo. One single snapshot that spoke louder than any letter I could have written. It showed Simone, stunning in her bikini, walking along the beach in St. Bart's. Joel and Juliet were beaming hand in hand with me. A simple photo. A quiet, dignified goodbye. There was no caption. None was needed. I wrote her a short message before I left. I wish you a good life. It wasn't a threat, just a final note of caution. After all, her boyfriend was a cop. I thought it might be wise to cover my bases. How did I know he was in law enforcement? Because when I came home early that day, I found his uniform and his duty belt scattered across my living room floor. Right there next to my wife's clothes. Shirts, jeans, underwear, tossed in every direction like confetti after a celebration. Only this wasn't a celebration. It was an ambush on everything I thought I knew. Their voices carried clearly through the hallway. I stood frozen, listening to them tangled up in each other in my own bed. "That's it, baby. Do it for me harder," I heard him groan. My wife, breathless, answered, "I've never felt anything like this until you came along. Thank God you did." The bed creaked. The headboard thumped rhythmically against the wall. And I just stood there paralyzed. It felt like someone drove a hot blade straight into my chest. My legs didn't want to move, but somehow I found myself turning around and walking right back outside. As I reached the street, I noticed something I hadn't seen when I pulled in. There was a marked black and white police cruiser parked right in front of our house. At first, my heart skipped for a different reason. I thought something had happened to my wife. Something terrible. I rushed to the driveway in a panic and nearly clipped her brand new silver Lexus. I accidentally knocked over her little garden gnome, one of those smug-looking plaster ones she loved. I didn't even bother to shut the car door. I sprinted inside. That's how I ended up sitting at the kitchen table, clutching a cup of coffee in silence while my whole world cracked open above me. "Take me now, stud," I heard her whisper. "Make me feel good." And then silence. About 90 minutes passed. Everything got strangely quiet. Maybe they took a break. Maybe they realized something was off. I heard her voice again. "What's that smell?" There was no answer. Then I heard her again, this time in a shriek. "Oh my God!" Suddenly there was a flurry of motion. Doors slamming, drawers opening, things being shuffled around. I guess they were trying to clean up whatever evidence they could find. Maybe my scent on the bed. Maybe something worse. At that point I made a mental note. I need to get tested. For everything. I didn't trust anything anymore. And then they saw me. I guess they hadn't realized I was sitting there, still as a ghost. Audrey, my wife, let out a gasp, sharp and high-pitched, her hands flying to her mouth. Her lover froze. Just stood there like a deer caught in headlights. The 3 of us locked in a triangle of shame. It didn't end there. Later, I found out that the police had impounded Audrey's car. Turns out, there were a couple ounces of marijuana stashed in the front seat. Unaccounted for. Sergeant Mark, the officer who handled the report, pulled me aside and said quietly, "Normally we just write a citation. Maybe a warning. But I figured this department owed you something. Don't worry," he added. "You'll probably be able to pick it up after they finish the forensics." She wasn't screaming anymore by that point. Her voice had dropped to something almost pitiful. Like a woman trying to hold on to the last thread of a life unraveling. "I didn't want them to fire you," she told him. "They'll probably just transfer you to Little Rock." And then she looked at me, looked through me, and added with chilling confidence, "When I talked to my attorney, she said since you earn more than I do, you'll be paying child support. Probably around $3,000 a month." That was it. That was the moment I knew, whatever this had been, whatever story we once shared, it was over. Burned down to ash. I know a lot of men, especially the proud, chest-pounding types, don't like to admit when they've been cheated on. Some won't even let the words cross their lips. But that's not going to be me. I'm not hiding from it. I'm not pretending it didn't happen. I've decided to take some time off work, maybe head out on a long fishing trip. Something quiet. Something far. Just me, the sea, and the silence. Like that old country song says, "Deep sea señorita, help me drift away." The morning she left, Audrey came downstairs. She was dressed, but she didn't have her suitcase. Her eyes didn't meet mine. "Evan, honey, we're ready," she said, to our son. And just like that, I heard her parents' car pulling into the driveway. I held the door open for her. Still a gentleman even when my heart was dragging behind me like a broken limb. "Goodbye, Audrey." She didn't say much. Didn't have to. The silence did the talking. Later that evening I thought maybe I'd feel relief or grief or maybe nothing at all. But instead it was this eerie stillness. I walked through the house. It felt hollow. Then I noticed something. There was a note on the kitchen table. "Mike, I'm sorry I couldn't say this in person. Helen." Helen. My wife of 11 years. Gone without a word. I stood there reading it over and over, trying to make sense of what had just happened. It wasn't just her. The kids were gone too. The man she left me for? His name was Carl Karlslake. He owned a big construction firm around town. I'd done a few jobs for his company before. Nothing major. But that was about to change in more ways than one. A few nights later, I walked into a local bar just to breathe. My buddy Paul spotted me immediately. He looked surprised. "Mike," he asked. "Wow, rare to see you out. You escaped the family for the night?" "Something like that," I replied. Then I told him. The empty house. The note. The packet of divorce papers. Paul blinked hard and shook his head. "Helen's divorcing you?" He was as shocked as I had been. Said Carl had always turned down my bids in the past, but when he hired other contractors, their work didn't measure up. Things started falling apart. His sites ran behind schedule. After 6 months of sloppy builds, Helen and Carl got married. That was 3 months after the divorce finalized. While they were off on their honeymoon, I took care of the kids for a week. Not because I wanted to help them, but because I figured a solid week with my kids beat the fragmented visits I'd get later. What broke me, though, was when my daughter, Chloe, looked up at me with those big eyes and asked, "Daddy, why did you send us to live with Mom and Henry?" I didn't send them anywhere. They were taken. But how do you explain that to a child? That night, I tucked her in gently on the couch and wrapped a blanket around her. I slept in a chair nearby just in case she woke up. The next morning, when Emily, the widow from down the street, left the house, Helen showed up to drop off the kids. "Well," she said, looking me up and down, "I see you're not wasting any time, Mike." I stared at her. "Come on, Helen. Her husband just passed." She glanced away, then turned her attention to the kids. Later that day, I sat them down and explained why Emily wouldn't be around anymore. Chloe was quiet, set, and little Lee. I don't think he fully understood. Emily eventually invited me to Gary's funeral, her late husband, and to my surprise, she later asked if I'd join her for dinner. Just as friends. Nothing more. But the next time Helen showed up for the kids, she couldn't hide her curiosity. "Who's that?" she asked, motioning toward Emily's car. "She's just a friend," I said calmly. "And whatever I do these days, that's none of your business." She didn't argue. But before she turned to go, she muttered, "Well, I guess I didn't get everything I wanted after all." "No, Helen. You didn't." When she finally confronted me about the kids, I didn't hold back. I told her straight. She left me for a life of comfort and luxury with another man. A man who had already taken my wife and turned my world upside down. He didn't get to take my children too. "If he wants kids," I said, "he can have his own." There was no way I was going to agree to Henry adopting my children. That was my line in the sand, and I stood by it. Meanwhile, things with Emily had grown into something real, something steady. The kind of peace I never had with Helen. As the months passed, she sold her house and moved in with me. The kids took to her warmly. They could tell how happy I was with her, and I'm sure word got back to Helen eventually. That probably didn't sit well with her. She didn't want me anymore, but she definitely didn't want to see me happy with someone else either. But Emily did want me. She chose me every single day. A year after our first night together, Emily and I got married. When the kids told Helen, she just snorted and turned away. No blessing. No congratulations. Just bitterness. Emily and I eventually had 2 children of our own, Gary and Robert. My older kids were growing into strong, capable young adults, and seeing them thrive was one of the greatest rewards of my life. When they needed me, I was there. Not perfect, just present. Years later, when Chloe and Josh, my oldest, got married, we chose to host everyone at our home the night before to avoid unnecessary tension. Emily made the place feel warm and welcoming, just like she always did. On Chloe's wedding day, Helen. She didn't seem thrilled about any of it. Chloe politely informed her that she and Henry would be seated behind Emily and me at the church. Helen didn't argue, just pursed her lips and followed along. The The ceremony was beautiful. Peaceful. A kind of closure I didn't know I needed until it was happening. At the reception, I agreed to let Helen sit at the top table. It was a gesture for our children, not for her. Henry, meanwhile, was seated off to the side with Emily, Robert, Gary and little Lee. After the speeches, the caterers cleared a few tables to make room for dancing. I grabbed a drink and stood for a minute taking it all in. Chloe and Josh twirling across the floor. Laughter echoing through the hall. My sons grinning from ear to ear. Emily's hand in mine. And I realized something right then and there. I didn't just recover from betrayal. I traded up. What I have now, this family, this love, this life, it's more than I ever thought possible back when everything was falling apart. I didn't just survive. I rebuilt. And I came out stronger on the other side.